Senator Mark Kelly, Democrat of Arizona, who appeared in that video telling troops not to follow illegal orders, joins me now. Senator, first, I want to get your sense do you have a clear sense or a clear story from the Pentagon about what happened here, or do you need to know more?
Oh, we need to know a lot more, Chris, and thank you for having me on. I went back and listened to some of the tape where I was asking some questions in the secure facility about those strikes. And there was, a lot of holes, and they could not give us a lot of information, and I felt they were being rather evasive. And it was not a compelling brief. So there needs to be an investigation. But I also want to comment on some of the video you showed of President Trump and Pete Hegseth. I mean, this is not leadership. We've never seen presidents, secretaries of defense that have acted in this way. The president is blaming Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth is blaming the admiral. Hegseth is basically turned around and doing the 100-yard dash in the opposite direction. This is exactly not the kind of leaders you ever want running any organization.
Yeah, I want to read for you. I mean, this caught a lot of people's attention in the last few days when, as this story was developing, Pete Hegseth posts on X, "Let's make one thing crystal clear. Admiral Mitch Bradley is an American hero, a true professional. He has my 100% support. I stand by him in the combat decisions he has made on the September 2nd mission and all others since. America is fortunate to have such men protecting us. When this department says we have the backs of our warriors, we mean it." A lot of people interpreted this as a very obvious attempt to pin this entirely on the admiral.
100%. But is anybody surprised by this guy? I mean, this is the most unqualified Secretary of Defense we've ever had in the history of our country by far. I mean, he runs around on a stage talking about lethality and hunting and killing people. He's working for a president that says, hey, we're just going to, we're going to go out and kill people. This is kind of the environment that these folks have created at the Department of Defense, and it has serious, serious consequences. Now, there needs to be an investigation. I don't want to prejudge anything, but we need to get the facts. We need to see the video. And we need to call Pete Hegseth, certainly in front of the committee and ask him, some serious questions about his leadership, the orders he gave, the environment that he has created in the department.
Roger Wicker, the Republican senator from Mississippi, is the chair of the Armed Services Committee. Senator Reid from Rhode Island is the Democratic ranking member. And it was striking. They put out a statement saying, we want an investigation here. And I've talked to some people about, is this real or not? Like, are we actually going to see genuine oversight and investigation from Senate Republicans on this? You're much closer to them than I am. Do you have confidence this is real?
Well, I have confidence in the chairman of the Armed Services Committee that he's going to try. But are we really going to get transparency from a Department of Defense that has fired inspectors general and JAG officers, the lawyers? They're not looking for transparency. I think they're going to do everything they possibly can to make sure that the real story doesn't get out. But I will say this, there's video. And that video, should be shared. They shared the first part of it with the American people. There's also a legal analysis that I think needs to be made public as well, which is, it's got a lot of holes in it, a lot of circular logic on why this entire operation has been, conducted. And I still have a lot of questions about it.
Yeah, let's stay on that for a second, because I think there's some senses in which it's been my view just watching this. It seemed to me that the legal predicate or rationale for these strikes is incredibly thin and amounts to essentially killing civilians using wartime powers and authorities that are undeclared, unsought from Congress, and not publicly argued for. Now, in this case, the killing of two survivors is so clearly something that's, out past what's legally allowable. It seems to have captured people's attention. But do you think we should be having oversight of the entire operation as well, even if they are, they are drug runners or they are smuggling drugs or whatever is being alleged here?
Well, yeah, we don't want drugs coming into our country. But this appears to me, and I think many others, to be a law enforcement problem. And we have to do a better job interdicting, these drugs coming into the country. A lot of this stuff goes to Caribbean islands first. Some of it goes on to Europe. Some of it goes into Mexico and through the southern border. But this is a job for the Coast Guard or sometimes a joint operation with the Navy. But Coast Guard does the law enforcement, operation here. And, they have taken our country, in a direction that now we have members of the United States military that have been put in an impossible situation because they're given, in the case of what we've seen here over the last couple of days, clearly unlawful, illegal orders. And there's tremendous pressure on them. And that was the point, of our video, is to remind, members of the military that they have an obligation to follow the law. It wasn't specific to this case, but when you consider who this Secretary of Defense is and who this president is, we felt it was a very important message to get to our warfighters.
There was a very strange moment today in which the president was having a cabinet meeting where Pete Hegseth was sort of once again kind of reiterating his distance from the ultimate decision on the second strike. And at the same time, or roughly contemporaneously, there was a press conference at the Pentagon they've basically kicked all the traditional, let's say, reporters out because they wouldn't sign this somewhat ludicrous agreement.
Here, but there's not a story that I've more desperately wanted to talk to you about since this Post story just blew this unbelievable fact out into public view, and I wonder your thoughts on all of it.
I am disturbed by this, I think, as everybody is. I was taking a step back from this, Nicole. I don't understand why we're going to war with Venezuela. And I'm not sure the administration has even bothered to try to come up with anything even internally coherent in terms of explaining why Trump has proclaimed that we are at war with Venezuela. My sense is that they wanted to use the Alien Enemies Act to illegally deport people, arrest and deport people from this country that actually weren't subject to deportation. They decided the Alien Enemies Act was a way to do that. They then realized the Alien Enemies Act required a war, so then they declared a war. Then they needed a reason for the war, so then they reverse engineered some sort of reason for the war. Mm-hmm. Ostensibly right now, the reason for the war is to stop drug trafficking into the United States. Today, the man convicted of the largest volume of drug trafficking in the history of the United States was just freed from prison by Donald Trump, the former president of Honduras. So clearly, if that's the area of focus, that isn't the justification for this war. So what are we doing there in the first place? Why are we blowing out of the water and killing people in boats with outboard motors, some of which aren't even pointed towards the United States, let alone verified to have drugs on them, let alone even if they were coming to the United States and they had the capacity to reach the United States and they were filled with drugs, why isn't it possible to just interdict them the way that we do with the Coast Guard, where you go and take the drugs and then put those people on trial and investigate and then follow the drugs to their source of origin and then take care of it there? Like, none of this makes any sense. It feels like they bumbled themselves into a profoundly incoherent and illegal situation in which they decided the one true benefit they were getting out of all of it is that they were getting video game style visuals to play on Fox News and put on TikTok. And they liked that. So now they have put this admiral, the commander of Southern Command, every senior officer in that command, and all of the servicemen and women who serve there in the position of potentially being held liable for murder or war crimes until the statute of limitations on those matters runs. And I don't even know what it would be. And by backing and bumbling and shambolically rambling themselves into this mess, I'm less worried about the fate of the bad guys who have gotten us here than I am about the good people who've been put in the way of this mess. And from Admiral Bradley on down. And it's a catastrophe. I think Pete Hegseth, it's impossible to imagine that he survives this as Secretary of Defense. I think he must resign, and I think Republicans will ask for that ultimately once they investigate this. But this is a disaster for this generation of people serving in the United States military.
I think it's fair to say, and I don't mean this in a vindictive way, but I almost mean it like in a karmic retribution. But people like Kelly, Senator Kelly, and so many other Democrats that have served their country, and just generals and other military people that have stood up to Trump, leaders of veterans organizations. The list could go on and on. Names that we've talked about and folks just on the ground that are unsung heroes. They're getting a bit of revenge on Trump and Hegseth. And they're getting a little bit of an I told you so moment that they deserve, because they were warning people. They were warning people how dangerous, and they were doing it before he came back to power, of course, but they were warning people and have since, the start of this new Trump presidency, that this is a man that will, distort military power, and his henchman, Hegseth, will be the main tool to do that in order to achieve his fascistic goals. And there will be no limit. And it's not going to happen all at once, but little by little, he's going to do things that are immoral, if not outright illegal, unconstitutional, violations of international law, blah, 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 blah. And they got a lot of pushback. They said, how dare these veterans speak out against the commander-in-chief? Or how dare these Democrats say disobey an order from your commander-in-chief if needed? Well, guys, a week after they made that video and everyone called them out, what happened? At least according to the reporting I've seen, Pete Hegseth ordered a double tap strike. Meaning that they took care of the target. Again, whether the target's legitimate or not is a whole nother question. I don't think it is. But if it was, they took care of a legitimate target. They had confirmation that it was destroyed. At that point, it posed no threat to real or even imagined. Even in an imaginary sense, it wasn't a threat. And then they went back and they finished the job by ending 2 additional lives, at least. These are the orders that they're asking people to refuse. And I don't think it's necessarily they're judging that particular. So, ultimately, this is about Hegseth and Trump. But if somebody refused that order, would you blame them? Or would you call them a hero? I think the strategy by Senator Kelly has been vindicated. He's gotten revenge on all the naysayers.